You're about to enter into a new world of knowledge, curiosities, and high strangeness. This is a podcast of Straight Up Strange Productions.
You're listening to Mysteries and Monsters. I'm your host, Paul Bestall. Welcome to a bonus episode of Mysteries and Monsters. Well, due to the last show featuring some audio issues and essentially sounding like I'd recorded the interview in Atlantis, I figured the best way to make up for it was to give you an extra episode this week, just to say thank you. So on this week's show, I'm joined by James Newton from the London Cryptozoological Society to discuss various cryptids from around the world. From Bigfoot and the orang pendek to Mkolele-Mbembe and the strange case of the Ropen, we take a world tour discussing some of our favourite monsters from around the globe. Thanks to James for joining me, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. We've got a couple of Patreon-only shows coming up in July too, so don't forget you can sign up for just $4 a month and join the supporters helping us grow. Our regular episode will drop on Monday, and July will see the return of some of our most popular guests that we've had on previous episodes, as well as some pretty big names making their first ever appearance on Mysteries and Monsters. I hope you'll enjoy them. Before this bonus show, don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms, leave a nice review on your podcast app if you can, and don't forget that bonus content on Patreon. A big thank you to Dean, my brother, for his artwork, and Brennan Storr for his production duties as always. So, we also smashed through 100,000 downloads last week, so thank you all for your continued support. It means the world to me. Thank you. Now, here's that bonus show. Enjoy. Tonight, I'm joined by self-confessed armchair cryptozoologist James Newton. Another person corrupted to the Fortean world by Arthur C. Clarke's mysterious world, James also has an avid interest in wildlife, and his interest in cryptozoology veers strongly towards the zoology aspect. His main interest is hominology, and his views on this matter have really changed over the last 40 years, and I am delighted, James, to welcome you to Mysteries and Monsters. Good evening.
Good evening. Nice to meet you.
My pleasure as well, thank you. And another mutual friend of Richard Freeman.
Yes, indeed.
I think at this rate I'll be paying Richard a commission, I think.
Yeah, he deserves it. A very, very, very good chap. So I've known him a few years. So yeah, always enjoy him at things like the Weird Weekends down in Devon when I think I first met him, and a few times when he was speaking at various other events in London and elsewhere. So very interesting chap.
Very much so. He's been very kind. We've built a rather nice friendship over the last 12 months or so. So it's one of those weird things, James, that when I started this show, I didn't expect to end up becoming friends with people that I respected as much, and Richard is one of those people. So not complaining. It's a bonus.
Great. Yeah.
So as I touched on in your introduction there, James, you are probably around the same age as myself, because I also was corrupted by Arthur C. Clarke. I say corrupted. I think most people would say had my mind opened.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. That's a fair enough way to say about it, actually. And fortunately, I was lucky enough to have two parents who were quite open to watching, programs like that as well. So those sort of things were never forbidden, for me to watch for any particular reason. So that was always very great. So a big shout out to my mum and dad on that one as well. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it often helps. I think it's that period of time, especially for us here in the UK. It seems to have been the real catalyst for a lot of people around our age to basically just discover this wonderful world of monsters and ghosts and cryptids. And it's something I still on occasions when I've got a quiet night in, because you can find most of them on YouTube.
Oh yes, yeah.
I love to dive down that rabbit hole because it's very interesting. As I said on your introduction about, especially in regards to hominology, how much has changed in 40 years, and 40 years for normal, in normal terms is quite a long time, but
yeah.
in science it's basically a pin drop, isn't it?
Completely. I mean, I think it's the. For me, I think it's one of the. It was about that time watching Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, and I think it also clashed with that time. I can remember the $6 Million Man episode with Bigfoot in as well. I mean, it was all that all come to that point that, and when school libraries were really, really good and full of books and that, and you could find things in them. I think I mentioned that, coming across purely by accident, Janet and Colin Board's book, Alien Animals, and just read it, cover to cover, and from that found the Bigfoot case book and, read that and would go through. And I think to this day, one of my favourite, just the depth of stuff that they put in there, and I remember one of the, at the back they list about 1,000 sightings from the historic period right up to then. That was the modern period for them at that point, which I think was 1979 or 1980. And I remember my favourite story was of a woman on a farm somewhere who realised that a 9-foot Bigfoot was running off with a couple of her geese, and so she chased it, and the Bigfoot turned around and threw one of the geese at her, and that knocked her down. I just remember thinking, this is quite interesting. But yeah, I mean, in terms of one of the areas of cryptozoology, I mean, it's that whole field has changed hugely, really, and I think it's to a degree has become, within the field of cryptozoology and zoology in general, one of the most, politically is the wrong word to use, but I think you probably know what I mean. It's one of the most contentious issues within cryptozoology, and I remember about 6-7 years ago down at one of the weird weekends down in Devon, and speaking there to Carl Schuker. I happened to visit at that one, and I remember him saying to me, he goes, oh, I just avoid hominology debates like the plague, just the simple reason. He said it's just so loaded with opinion and just sort of like can be quite vitriolic sort of thing, and it seems to have got more so. I mean, fortunately, I'm not within that, but I read a lot of stuff about it. So yeah, very, very much has changed there. Really has. Absolutely,
I think it has. It's a double-edged sword, especially when it comes to Bigfoot. I think in all the creatures that come under the cryptozoological umbrella, James.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Bigfoot certainly is the one where there are very defined camps and trains of thought, and it would often seem that never the twain shall mix.
Yes, exactly. Yep. Yes.
I was reading some because one of the Bigfoot groups I'm a member of on Facebook is followed by some pretty big hitters.
Okay.
People like John Kirk III and Daniel Perez and Kit Morrell, and proper boots on the ground physical investigators. And they were discussing a famous pair of Bigfoot researchers from the 1980s who ended up getting the police involved because one person was absolutely adamant that these were alien slaves deposited on Earth in regards to mining certain minerals, and the other person was convinced that these were parallel dimensional beings, and therefore the one had to take out an injunction on the other to stop them harassing them. And that's from 1989, I think. And it was one of those stories, James, where you just think, really?
Yes, yeah.
And here we are, 2020, and we still have these strange camps and people that are very full on in their belief into what the explanations are.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's the thing, is that a lot of people have, it's a very, there are these things of strict camps, and that's never really sat very, very comfortable with me. And yesterday I was talking to my partner about this, and was asked, what really is your opinion? And I said, I said, I've only got the point of actually, I said, I've never done anything more than read. I've read a lot. I've done a lot of, online searching and things like that, of looking at stuff. And for me, I said, it's very much like I feel that the best way I could describe it is, for me, I think Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever, is, and I'm talking about the North American here, I think maybe there are differences around the world, for sure, in my opinion, but certainly in North America, I think very much my opinion is it's a natural phenomenon that, as yet, science it does not have the right amount of knowledge, I think, at the moment to understand what this natural phenomena is. And one of the things, there's a few people that I've subscribed to, follow online. I mean, I don't really, I definitely don't like that. Who do you follow? I don't really follow anybody.
Yeah.
I listen to people and things, but I can't remember his name. But the guy he's a Canadian, and he set up his initial YouTube channel as How to Hunt. He's a hunter, and his stuff, when I've heard him a few times say, he said, and I thought, gosh, that's really nice to hear someone echoing my point of view. And he goes, I don't know what the hell these things are. He goes, but, to go around and call all these people liars for seeing this and things like that, he's, for me, he's one of the people who stands out and says, I don't know what they are. He goes, I've had two experiences. He goes, I have a lot of people coming up to me. He goes, and I can't give people answers of what they are. I said, but people will talk to me because I don't judge them on what they're saying. The other one of the North American channels I like is called Bigfoot Odyssey. And one of the things I really, really like about them, again, it's what I call old school sort of like journalism, where they go, they meet people who are reporting things happening on where they live or something like that, and they just let these people talk, and they might be able to talk for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I really enjoy that. I really just hear listening to people talk. People running around woods and shouting and hollering and banging on trees all the time, and we've got £4 million worth of the most up-to-date equipment. And I think one of the other people I've really liked over the years is from Oregon is a woman called Autumn Williams, and I remember once one of her videos she was saying once that she goes a lot of these people she goes they're ignoring the first rule of science. She goes, if you keep doing something and it doesn't work, then you go back to the drawing board and try something else, but they keep doing the same thing over and over again. And again, I think this is where the political side of it comes in. There's a lot of money now being involved in these people with some of these Bigfoot researchers and what they're going to do and how they're going to do it, and we'll take you out for X amount of thousands of pounds and we'll do this with you. And so this is why I think for me where it all gets quite messy, where I think I'd rather just sit back and read and make my own decisions about things, really.
Yeah, it is perplexing. Well, I mean, it's not perplexing because obviously I've been very fortunate to speak with some of the best Bigfoot researchers in the world in the process of doing this show, and it's very interesting because I'm a very much a flesh and blood, boots on the ground, real creature camp personally, and I subscribe to a similar train of thought as yourself, James. That I think we're simply awaiting a scientific conclusion in regards to it being a member of the hominid family of some description, whether it's Gigantopithecus or whether it could be one of the other ones such as Kenyapithecus or something like that. I was talking to Micah Hanks the other week, and I suggested to him that I think when it comes to hominology and hominids in general, in comparison to, say, dinosaurs, I think there's a real lack of knowledge about hominids and their evolution in comparison to dinosaurs, because they're just not as sexy. Yes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you're right. You're right on that one. I think there's that well, I think so many of these different camps within cryptozoology. I mean, I think probably first of all, just before I go on to that one, I just thought one of the things for me is, and I think how my views have changed over the years is that I sort of subscribe to the idea now that I personally don't actually think Bigfoot, North American Bigfoot, I'm very, very, very clear about this, North American Bigfoot at least, is not a gigantopithecine of some sort, just waiting to be discovered. I think, to me, the argument that the mountain gorilla was a creature of myth for X amount of years until it's sort of, I don't think we're at that scenario. I think it's moved beyond that. I'm not saying, and I don't know. I don't think necessarily it means. I think that Bigfoot are aliens. I think, if anything, I'm more likely to go in with what the Native Americans said, which will quite often, so that they are just another tribe of Indians who live out somewhere, and that's sort of like my where I've come to with that. I think I was waiting for years and years for, essentially an upright mountain gorilla to be discovered in the forest and all that. And I'm thinking, I've been following this now for over 40 years, from a small child upwards, and things haven't changed. I thought, no, something else is different here. But I think one of the things, again, with I'm just keep zipping back now, but you mentioned about the dinosaurs and that, and I think one of the things there, reading a lot, I find it fantastic. I think it'd be great, if there were sort of, surviving large reptilians of some sort. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're dinosaurs in the Amazon or the Congo Basin or various other relatively remote parts of the world. But how that's been latched on by large numbers of people who are out and out creationists and are using cryptozoology to support their belief in creationism. Now, again, I'm not a religious person. I don't really have any belief at all, or anything like that. But I'm actually quite open to the idea as a concept of creationism. It's just, there's no necessarily any particular reason, to my mind, or I haven't read enough about it either way to make an informed decision. But I find it's quite interesting theories. I think what I've been slightly annoyed at over the years is that I've been sold a few books. This is a great there's a cryptozoology inquiry, and then it turns into it's one man or a group of men's quests to prove that the earth was made X amount of years ago by a Judeo-Christian Islamic god. And I'm thinking, I like your theory. I don't really, I respect your theory, but I feel a bit cheated that you've got me to buy your book by saying it's a cryptozoology book where it's actually not. It feels a bit fraudulent to me. Yes. So yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, that is a rabbit hole I once fell down, and it's not a journey I want to retake. I'll say that. And that was when I was looking into sightings of pterodactyls and pterodons, and I was completely unaware. I don't know why, but I was completely unaware of this creationist angle. Completely unaware of it until I was looking at that, and then I also discovered that seems to be a proponent in the Mkolele-Mbembe creature as well. That seems to be the underlying current there, and I was really perplexed by this, and I was like, I didn't even know this niche inside cryptozoology existed until I was looking for dinosaurs.
Yeah, I think that's me. I can very, very clearly. I'm not too sure. Am I allowed to mention the title of the book, or should I keep that quiet? I think it was called Searching for Ropens or Hunting for Ropens and that, and it was and the book was and the one thing I came out of it thinking, I really admire this guy. This guy feels absolutely passionate. He's self-funded and he's taken himself off to these islands on the edge of New Guinea, or maybe it was the Solomon Islands or New Caledonia, somewhere like that. And I thought he really, really is passionate, and I admire his passion for something like that. But the fact that I just felt duped into sort of it wasn't much money. I think it was about £8 or something like that. But I just thought oh, come on, it's sort of surely there are other ways to, I've got a friend who's a science teacher, who's born in the bone, complete science, complete evolutionist, sort of things like that. And even he said there are much more coherent arguments for arguing the case for creationism than there is than using cryptozoology as a way in, sort of thing, really. So he said you can do it with flowers. He said that's why he said not great big human eating flowers. He said tiny little things. Like, you can make a case for creationism that way if you want to. You don't have to go looking for dinosaurs.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's one of those facets as well, because it purports to be one thing, but essentially it's something else.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Completely. Yeah.
Yeah, very strange, and especially the Ropen as well, because I think that was one of the creatures that I stumbled across with this undercurrent behind it, and I was just like, yeah, we'll leave that in the Pacific where it belongs, and we'll leave that one alone. So, yeah, I mean, it is, for me, I think, out of all the hominids, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they raised a really good point about this, was that North America, in cryptozoological terms, has probably been the most explored continent on Earth.
Yes, yeah.
And we've still not found anything. Or some would say we have, and I'm not going into conspiracy theories and Mount St. Helens and all that. And that's a whole different ballgame. And as I've developed my knowledge and my learning in the subject matter, James, I've tended to drift towards the fact that I think that there are the chances that we discover orang pendek or the Yeren or the almasti. I suspect that there's probably a bit more. Not that I'm dismissing Bigfoot, because
sure.
We can't dismiss thousands of years of oral tradition and stories, regardless.
Yeah.
But there seems to be something a little bit more concrete in regards to these creatures, I think, and also the locations they're in being far-flung corners of the world.
Yes, yeah. Exactly that. That's why, I think one of the, I think, again, for me, she's one of the unsung heroes of cryptozoology. It's one of the first books I ever picked up years ago, when I came across Myra Shackley's book. I think it has a couple of titles called, I think one of them was called Still Living, and another one where that was my first introduction to things like the Almas of the Caucasus and, Central Asia, the Yeti. For some reason, I've never really been that interested in the Yeti for some reason, but I've been really fascinated much more by the sort of the Russian creatures and all the ones in all the Stan countries, and again down to orang pendek and things like that. And I think you're right. For me, it's almost like that's where, if we want really, really good evidence, and I think particularly with orang pendek. That it seems that it's almost like one thing. I'd be really, really surprised if that was ever proved to be a fake. It just makes absolutely perfect sense why that would exist. The fact of, and I can remember actually, funny, if it was Richard Freeman a couple of years ago saying something. I think it was when he was talking once, and he said I'm pretty sure it was Richard who told me, he was saying that when he was with a group of people trying to get some official scientific recognition with a zoological body about would they invest for some reason into the research into orang pendek, and they said no, and apparently the reason we go was because it's too big for us to take seriously. And it was just like, well, the orang pendek, from what everything I've read, seems to be on its adult height anything between 3 foot and 5 foot tall. Lives in, it's been described as one of the densest rainforests on Earth, and yet, this is one of those things, isn't it, where size does matter in this situation. It's just like, it's too big for us to investigate, because if we go looking for this, we look like idiots. And again, it's sort of like, where's the scientific inquiry there? It's just like, where's the risk taking? This is not, you've got orangutans that live in the forest, no more than a couple of 100 miles away. To have another ape living in those forests is not you do almost have to ask yourself, well, why isn't there an ape in those? So if there's no ever records of orangutans in those forests, then surely there must have been something else that was in there that would have been fulfilling that niche, pure ecological, biological reasons and that. But that whole refusal to do that. I mean, that's the I find that's the saddest thing, really. I think with all of cryptozoology. Now, I understand why some of them, perhaps with things like Bigfoot and the dinosaurs, people do keep a bit of a distance from it. But again, I've always been an avid and maintained being an avid interest in mainstream wildlife conservation and zoology and things like that. And last, I think it was Weird Weekend North last year up in Warrington, and Richard was talking there, and I was fascinated because one of the things he was talking about with the hominids in Central Asia where he'd been, but he was talking about the survival of the Caspian tiger, and again it made absolute perfect evolutionary biological sense. They were known to have been there 40 years. There's no reason at all why half a dozen might have escaped the hunter's guns. They might have been by nature more secretive, more cautious than the ones who didn't survive the hunter's guns and gave birth to a population of much more secretive, more cautious. It follows that would follow sound biological principles. But when Richard said that, he went to, I think again it was one of the big cat, conservation groups or something like that, said no, they weren't interested in spite of the anecdotal evidence here, they said to me, no, we're not interested, as far as we're concerned, they're extinct. It's like, I mean, I don't know how you deal with that, really. It's and don't get me wrong, there are some cryptozoologists really haven't helped themselves, but at the same time being faced with that degree of arrogance, I think, and that blinkeredness, I mean, to me it feels just like, well, it's a fundamental belief system, and to me, it's the same thing as fundamentalist Christianity, fundamentalist Islam, fundamentalist whatever, any sort of religion, fundamentalist atheism. But with that you have fundamentalist science. It's like, this is the world that we want to believe, and anything that doesn't fit that, we're going to, depending on your point of view of where you're coming from, this is witchcraft, folklore, superstition, or just lies. I mean, it's not coming from a spirit of inquiry. And again, I remember once, one of the weird weekends down in Devon, or probably at least 10 years ago, with oh gosh, I forgot the name of John
Downs.
John Downs was saying there's something really, really interesting there, and I can just remember him saying, he said, he goes, if we'd gone back 100 years ago, he said, virtually all zoology was cryptozoology. He said, people weren't known. People were hearing reports of a weird-looking type of antelope on the other side of the river or something that was different from us. And people went looking for it. He said, but then it's sort of like, then somewhere we've stopped it. And again, it's this whole thing that we know everything there is to know, so therefore we can stop now. And it's to me, it's a bizarre. It's a bizarre mindset. I hope by the time I die, and hopefully many years from now, that they'll still be finding new stuff, whether that's to do with cryptozoology, science, whatever.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's something that really annoys me as well, James, because my interpretation of science is that it will continually push the boundaries of knowledge to give us new insights and aspects to the universe that we were unaware of.
Yes, yeah.
And I want to know, when did we decide we weren't doing that anymore? Because, several scientists over the years, I mean, there was a physicist a few years ago claimed that we discovered 99% of everything in the universe, which is absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
But it becomes dogmatic, I think, as well. That as you say about fundamentalism, it does essentially become a fundamental facet of science that these are the parameters. Anything outside is nonsense, superstition, folklore. And yet, if you really put your mind to it and you sit down and you think, right, what do we know about certain scientific disciplines today in 2020 that 50 years ago would have been considered, woo-woo stuff. Things like sprites in the atmosphere, which we stumbled across completely from, by accident, only because of the amount of satellite tracking that we've started doing over the last couple of decades. We've seen these, continental-wide electrical bursts flying across the higher atmosphere. I mean, seriously. And there are certain aspects of science like ball lightning. We know it exists.
Yeah.
How many people have actually seen it?
Yes, yeah.
So it's frustrating, and the same thing comes to zoology as well, because I find it incredible that people are so close-minded. Not necessarily, I'm not just talking about things like Bigfoot and the like, but cryptozoology covers a wide expanse of all parts of the animal kingdom. And we continually rediscover or discover new species of creatures, be they cats, fish, lizards, frogs, butterflies, on an annual basis, James. And I find it baffling that people just go, nah, there's nothing to it at all. And yet, the wonderful example of this at the moment is the gentleman Forrest Galante, who's doing a show on Discovery. It might be Animal Planet, but it's one of those, called Extinct or Alive.
Oh, okay. I've never heard of that. Oh, okay. That's quite interesting to know. Yeah,
it's a fantastic show. He's a very engaging host, very clever, very intelligent, knows his stuff, and essentially he is looking for extinct animals. Therefore, to people like me and yourself, he's a cryptozoologist.
Yes, yeah.
In modern scientific terms, no, he's not, because there's that stigma that comes with the title, I think, of that particular thing. And he's rediscovered the clouded leopard. He's rediscovered a giant tortoise that hadn't been seen for 100 years.
Right. Yeah.
He is one of those people. He will go somewhere for a certain amount of time, and he will just go there. He will follow the stories, follow the local experiences, witnesses, whatever. And he keeps turning up trumps. Now, if he's doing that, and yes, I know it's all whistles and bells for television, so it's all a bit more exciting. That alone proves that blinkered approach to modern zoology is simply unacceptable, is it not?
To me, completely. That's. I mean, I think that it's where it sort of creeps in, where it has a degree of respectability, if you want to call it that. I think sometimes is where where they're talking about, sort of like. And again, it's certainly because the example I use of the Caspian tiger says where it certainly doesn't happen all the time, is where there are certain animals that have been known to exist and are presumed extinct. So again, one of the things I've been fascinated in for years was about the thylacine in Tasmania, and I know Richard's been there quite a few times as well. The other one, people that are laughing around just say, cryptozoologist. Well, this is to me is cryptozoologist. I don't know if you've ever come across a guy called Richard Thorns. Now, every year, every couple of years, if you can, he goes out to India, Burma, looking for the pink-headed duck. These, theoretically, I think it went extinct. I think the final ones were perceived to have died in a collection in Sussex. I think it was in about 1938. I think that was the last captive ones that died. But he goes out there, and he's going. So there are people doing, and that gets a degree of respectability. But the fact of actually looking for anything brand new is, I don't know. I mean, it's why it's just seen as so fringe. I just don't know. It's just bizarre. And I think a lot of it is, and I think it's just not cryptozoology. A friend of mine who's sort of interested in cryptozoology, but his main interest is sort of like, what does he call it? Is there a term for it? Essentially, he calls it things like, it's kind of like, hidden archaeology and hidden things like, so things to do with like, sort of like ancient civilizations and how did they build things, and things that to do with the world that may, our knowledge of ancient history might be at the very least, quite patchy,
Yes.
and in some ways actually full of glaring errors. It's based on a lot of assumptions, and crucially important, reputation,
Yes.
and that whole thing is that people. If what they've made their reputation on suddenly gets undermined, people get very, very defensive about that. They don't want they don't want to go, well, my life's work is actually somebody's put a big red line through it and just said, no, that wasn't the case. And I think, things like that, to do that actually, well, actually your research is actually, really, really valuable, and actually you probably did get a lot of things right, but there are some things you didn't get everything right, and again, I think that's a very, very very human thing. I think really is for people to always be seen to be right about everything, that they can't, admitting that they might have got something wrong just seems very, very difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, I've said this to a couple of people, because one of the criticisms is that, well, cryptozoology is full of hoaxes. And I was thinking, well, most sciences, there have been, numerous incidents in the last century of scientists of high intelligence that have created absolute nonsense. And claimed, strangely enough, I was having one of my YouTube sessions recently, and I caught an episode of Sightings from the 1990s, and that was interviewing two chaps who claimed to have created cold fusion. And that was it. And within 5 years, nobody would ever need to use gasoline or petrol or oil at all.
Right, yeah.
They proved it, and they were getting all this funding, and then all of a sudden, nobody could replicate their experiments and results, and they strangely disappeared, and everybody that supported them carried on as if nothing had happened.
Right, yeah.
And, that happens in all sorts. When I was speaking with Michael Hanks, the Piltdown Man came up, because that's a prime example of...
Oh, yes, yeah.
Of somebody just going out of their way to create something that fitted their train of scientific thought. James, it happens in every discipline of science, and yet cryptozoology constantly gets tarred with this, it's full of hoaxes.
Yes, yeah.
There's a lot of other scientists over the years that have been rather bad for their particular disciplines, I suggest.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I sort of hope that maybe with lots of younger people coming through now, that there may well be that they're less affected in some ways by things like that. Their methods of communication are. Well, I think that sometimes that can be one of those double-edged swords. I think that again, I was talking to somebody fairly recently about this. I said, back in the old days, as it were, people had to spend lots of time. I think in terms of sort of like Bigfoot research, people like John Green, Rene de Hinden, Grover Krantz had to go around, Peter Byrne had to go around the country interviewing people and spending years and years compiling data and then, writing long books, whereas now, it's, anybody with a bit of skill or a mate who knows what they're doing can put up a website, create a few good stories. And, the amount of what I refer to as absolutely appalling cryptozoology literature now is I mean, I remember a few years ago, it was great, every Christmas, a family would say, what do you want for Christmas? I was like, here's my book list. There's all these books coming out on crypto. And then they'd all come through in the post, and they'd be appalling. I mean, not all of them. Some of them, there are authors who come through. Richard Freeman is a good case in point. I love his books. Yeah. But there are other people as well who come through, every few years, bring out a book, and it's good. But there are, some of these, and I was like, well, it's the whole thing. Is who's to prove them wrong? And I think that's the other thing. The other thing with the with this whole thing of the technological computer age, as it were, sort of thing. It's just like any attention-seeking nutcase can come on board and get whatever they want. I mean, I can remember quite a few years ago now, seeing something on a web page somewhere, and it was it was one of those Blobsquatch photographs. Essentially, all I could see was a load of various shades of green and brown, and all these people were commenting. It must have been a Facebook group or something like that. And all these people, and then people say like, I can see another pair of eyes there. And I'm just thinking, I refused to get into those conversations. I just sort of like, but I'm just thinking like, well, I can't. And I thought like, you're not. This is the whole point. So from what I've read, so I can't say what I've seen, but from what I've read, I believe in Bigfoot Sasquatch. I don't know what Bigfoot Sasquatch is, and I'm not comfortable in saying, because I just, not because I'm scared, I just don't know, I just don't feel as if I know enough. But when people sort of like present stuff like that and just say, I see this, and I'm just saying like, you may have seen something there at that. You person who took that photograph may well have seen something at that point, but then presenting that as evidence, I think, is that they're not doing themselves any favours, and they're not doing the field, the field of study any favours as well. And I think I find that's a bit of a difficult one. And I can remember, again, this was only a year or two ago, seeing something again on another Facebook Bigfoot Sasquatch research page, and somebody said like, and it was a good clip of about 2 minutes long, and it was saying about blah blah blah, watch Bigfoot come out of the trees. Do you consider that? And I watched it whole through, couldn't see anything. Watched it again, second, third, and maybe even a fourth time, still couldn't see it. So then I put something that's like, I've watched it a few times now. I can't say. Can somebody tell me, exactly at what sort of minute it appears and where? Which I thought, is it 2 minutes, 2 minutes and 12 seconds into the clip and that? And then I was told very politely, but I needed to look with my heart. And I'm thinking, I just remember thinking like, right, I can't communicate with these people anymore because this is all part of some sort of like wider fantasy world that suits them. And I think, that's not just to do with cryptozoology. There's all sorts of, fantasy existences that people have, on the online world. It's certainly not. It's not restricted to cryptozoology. I just refuse to engage. I mean, I just won't get into debates with. I'm not into sort of slanging matches with people. Probably like you. I'd rather sort of like agree, disagree, and debate with somebody over a few pints in the pub rather than getting onto some sort of like, I've had a few, when I've commented a few times before, and I've always been polite. I always go out of my way to be polite about something, and I've been quite, sort of like attacked back for being polite. And I thought, and I just right, I just refuse to engage at the moment with these people. So just leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm always very sceptical of anything that involves a red ring, especially a picture. Yes. You need to look here, because I think the one thing about cryptozoology I didn't expect to learn is how to spell Paradeolia. It's incredible. And as a child, I had an instance of Paradeolia, and it's ridiculous looking back. But I remember once we had a couple of my cousins around the house, and it was, I don't know, November, so it was dark really early on, James. And one of my cousins needed to go to the toilet, and he opened the stairs door, and as he got to the bottom of the stairs, he just screamed and ran out. And he was convinced that there was a monster or a ghost at the top of the stairs.
Right, yeah.
And being the oldest one there, I think I was about 12, I'll show you. And we're all peering around this corner, I'm thinking, bloody hell, there is something there. And then, because you had to get into the hall to turn the light on, so it was that fear of this, whatever this was seeing you, I just ran across, turned the light on, and it was a duffel coat that had fallen over the banister.
Yeah.
That terrified five kids in a house in November at 6:30 on a Saturday evening. So, when I see a picture of a wood, and there's a big ring on it, I'm thinking, I'm not even going to bother straining my eyes looking at that, and it's just, it's one of those things that I just find incredibly frustrating. And like you say, I've come across people who say, you need to open your mind. And, well, no, because my eyes are open and I can't see a thing. It doesn't matter if my mind's open or my heart is. If my eyes can't see it, it's not there.
No, that's my point of view. So, I'm open-minded enough anyway. So I'm not even open-minded enough. I actively believe that Bigfoot, Sasquatch exists.
Yeah.
So I don't feel I need to be convinced of that, but what I need to be convinced of is that what you're showing me is proof. That's what I need to be convinced of. I'm not looking for proof as such. I'm looking for what your proof is that, that person is particularly presenting. I think it's, I do sometimes when the conspiracy theorists in me, sometimes it was all this sort of stuff, these rather sort of secretive, government organisations existing in the shadows, pointing out with this questionable evidence at best. And I think when it comes to evidence, one of the things that I do find really fascinating is the whole thing about the Patterson-Gimlin footage, and
yes.
And all of these people who time after time after time will actually say it's a fake, it's a man in a suit, blah blah, and yet every single time somebody's tried to replicate it, they've never been able to. It's
yes.
just like, and forget it. So you're unable to replicate it now 50 years of things in terms of makeup artistry and all that, how that's developed, and so you're saying you can't replicate that now, but it's still a fake. And I'm thinking, for me, it's probably one of the single most definitive bits of thing. And if anyone says, it's a hoax, so that's great. If that's your belief, that's fine. But please then go and look at and all those people who sought to upstage that and just say, to prove it's a hoax, because I've never once seen anything, and I can remember it was, I think it was about the mid to late 90s. It was a really good series, and it wasn't purely at cryptozoology. It had lots of different things. It was called To the Ends of the Earth. You might remember it. Yeah. And there's one that the guy did on Bigfoot, and he did that, and he said, they got a tallish actor in a suit, and he said, I'm looking at this, and he said that original footage, he goes, that looks to me something real. He said, we've tried to reenact this in this space, and what we've done, it looks like a man in the monkey suit, which what it did. So, yes, it was a pretty quick thing, but yeah, again, it's sort of things. There is some really, really good proof. That piece of footage has been analysed time and time again by very, very reputable people who have said we couldn't replicate that. We really, really could not replicate that. So yeah, very, very bizarre.
Yeah, it is a thorny subject, because I'm 100% convinced that's a real creature. Whatever it is, it's real. Yeah. Based purely on exactly the point you were making there, James, right? If it's that easy to do, right, do it again. Do it again, and prove to me now that it can be done. Because the last time I saw somebody do it was, I think, Animal Planet, about 5 years ago. We're doing this Sasquatch Man or Myth or wherever it was.
Right, yeah.
And they built it up about they were going to recreate it and prove once for all if it was real or not, right? And they ended up pulling most of their recreation because it looked hilarious. It was just so obviously a man in a really bad, and they'd apparently spent $100,000 on this suit.
Yes,
and it looked like a man in a suit.
Yeah.
Because one of the other loves of my life is really awful B movies, James. So I've seen most crap monster films ever made from all around the world. So whenever anybody says to me, "Oh yeah, well they've made films like that in the 50s and 60s," and I'm just like, "Really? How many of these films have you seen?" Because one of the best, I think, correlations between that is that the year after Bluff Creek, Planet of the Apes was released.
Yes, yeah.
And that was groundbreaking special effects. Planet of the Apes looks like people wearing makeup, because it was.
Yeah.
And I remember Rick Baker, the legendary prop and special effects artist, claiming, it's definitely fake. I've seen Rick Baker's first film, which is called Octoman, right?
Right, yeah.
Which was made 7 years later. And if you see that, you'll not listen to anything Rick Baker says about Bigfoot again. Right. I love Rick Baker.
Yeah.
But that's all they need to do. To put it to bed is somebody needs to just go, right, let's do this. And that's it, because I've always heard, was it Bob Hernandez who claimed to have been paid $100,000 for this suit?
Something, yeah.
And every time anybody came with him with the money saying, right, here's your money, he disappeared.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't find it now. Honestly, if you'd got that suit, you'd be a multi-millionaire overnight. Absolutely guaranteed. You would put everything to bed. That was it.
Yeah.
And yet people still work on this principle that it was a fake. That they found the suit. Where is it?
Yeah.
It's never been shown. It's never been recreated anywhere closely. Even using a bear, because it's not a bear. Because I've heard that excuse. It's a bear. Somebody once said it's a bear with a limp. And I was like, have you ever actually seen a bear? If you think that's what a bear looks like standing up, you need help. You know? It's crazy. So it's just so frustrating because it's clearly not. I mean, the other thing about the whole film as well, James, is, and a lot of people, I think, still don't realise this, it's a woman. It's a female.
Yes,
it's got breasts.
Yeah.
So if
why go to that extra complication of something? So it just doesn't make any sense at all. Yeah.
And if I was that good at special effects, I wouldn't be mucking about in a wood in California. I'd be down the coast banging on every door in LA trying to get a job in Hollywood if I was that good.
Yeah, exactly.
Here we are. What are we? It'd be 53 years this year. And Bob Gimlin's still with us, one of the sweetest, most sincere Bigfoot witnesses of all time. He's never changed his story, and the other aspect of this is, if you are hoaxing them, even if they weren't part of this hoax, James, they're in a hunting area.
Yes, yeah.
Somebody's going to shoot you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Why would you even risk something like that? So, really, really bizarre. I mean, it's funny enough, I mentioned that it takes back, again, one of the other sort of bizarre things some years ago I read on the internet where, again, it was one of these, one of the Facebook pages that I was a member of, and somebody was saying something about the Patterson-Gimlin footage and referring to Patty. And I don't even know how it got there, but these conversations, somebody must have said, in quite an innocuous way, it would be really nice to think that, Patty was still alive now, and then out of nowhere, all these people just jumped on board with this conversation, she's actually a great grandmother now, and it's just like, and it was just like, I'm like, she may well be a great grandmother, she may well be alive and living however Sasquatch live with in their extended family groups, but how you actually happen to know that she's a great grandma, and it was just, I think there's, it's just, there are, and unfortunately it is one of those things that it just attracts people, I think, with all sorts of different agendas, I think, really, and, some people are very, very vulnerable, I think, get into those things for a sense of, can get into those sort of things for a sense of community and belonging, and, something where they can create where that belonging and that community, and I think crypto or elements of cryptozoology are ripe for that, unfortunately.
Yeah, very much so. It is one of those things, like I've said, if you want me to shut up about Bigfoot, right, recreate the film, and then, I'll take my leave, I'll say thank you very much, and I'll keep my mouth shut. Here we are, and nobody's proved me wrong yet.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it could be exactly that. I mean, if somebody recreates that, and say, we've recreated it, and I say, fine, that's perfect, and it technically, feasibly could have been done. I would just say, that's great. Then I'm willing to believe that may have been a hoax, but that still wouldn't affect my opinion that Bigfoot is Sasquatch are real creatures. It still wouldn't affect that. I think there's all sorts of things that can be hoaxed and everything. So to me, it's a very, very minuscule chance that it was a hoax. Yeah. But as you said, exactly that. If someone could prove to me that they could replicate it in the here and now, then I would say, okay. And even then I'd just say, but yes, that could have been a hoax. There's no definite, you can't prove that it was, So.
Oh no, I'd be much stricter, James. I'd say, if you can do it now, but you cannot use anything that's become available since 1967.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, it is one of those things, though, as well, because there are people that are so convinced it's a hoax and that they won't believe it. It's the same with the Tic Tac video, the US Navy.
I've heard about that, but I don't really know what that is. I mean, I've heard something. Is that the UFO one or something?
Yes. So this was an incident from 2004 off the coast of California, just down from San Diego, and numerous members of the U.S. Navy witnessed this incident both as pilots and as crew on the ship and as radar operators. And the footage was leaked, and it's incredible. It's groundbreaking. These are the best of the best. You know, we're talking about US fighter pilots. These are not... I mean, it's one of those things as well, James. I think some people have an idea of pilots in their minds that they're just, you know, beefed up jocks who are idiots. Not the fact that these men are trusted to fly a $50 million vehicle around at high speed. And these guys are all mystified and confounded. They can't get their heads around, and it's going up and down and all over the place and just moving far too fast for a conventional craft. I've seen people recently, because obviously the US Navy last week confirmed that these videos are real and they show unidentified objects. They're not saying they're UFOs, they're unidentified, which is fine. Nobody's saying they're aliens.
Yeah.
And yet there is a skeptic who says that the entire US Navy administration, every single person in that can't tell that's a weather balloon. And it is. And I'm just like, are you seriously telling me that the most powerful nation on Earth can't tell when a weather balloon's flying about? Nonsense. But that's as bad as somebody drawing a ring round a piece of forest going, look, there's Bigfoot, open your heart.
No, completely.
It's laughable, James, that this person who sits in a cupboard somewhere in England dismissing every single UFO has literally nailed their colours to the mast that they know more than the entire US Navy. It's so laughable I nearly swore there. Because but that's as bad, you know what I mean? Because I often find, because I've been called a skeptic. And if any of my friends would hear that, they'd just say, "What? You're the weirdest person I know, Paul." So, but like you say, when you come across certain tranches of any kind of Fortean phenomenon, James, there is a line that I will not go past. You know, like orbs show people's faces and.
You know,
the paranormal investigation world is another bane of my life. But I've had enough experiences to take people's experiences on face value.
Yeah.
When we start claiming, I mean, it's one of those things like why do psychics never know what a ghost's surname is? I'm getting it's Steve. If you know his first name, does the ghost forgotten? And they all speak English as well. Which I find, so are psychics able to translate Latin now? Is this what we're not aware of? Because I once saw somebody claim to be channeling a 12th century spirit and speaking perfect English and swearing. Right?
Okay, yeah.
Now, I'm no linguist, James, but I know for a fact that they didn't use English in the 12th century, and they certainly didn't use the swear words we use today. And he was, he ended up moving to Australia and trying to flog it there, and he's reappeared. He's laughably bad. He's awful. I'm not even going to mention his name, but he's gone through an image overhaul, shall we say. Now he's like a hipster psychic.
Okay.
But he's still as bad.
Yeah. I can some years ago. I mean, it's never been an area. Again, it's one of those things I've been. I've been open-minded, but disinterested, if you know what I mean. It's one of those things that it's one of those things that doesn't really, I've always said, I'm always open to believe there's much more to heaven and earth than what science or anything else knows. So, it may well be that, to my mind, that some people can communicate with the dead or whatever that, but I've never been into it. But I remember one of my friends who is really, really into it, and he said to me, he goes to all those psychic fairs and things like that. But he always said to me, if I ever go to one, he goes, I go to the most the most ordinary looking man or woman there. He said, don't go to the ones who have got, they've got their sort of like, pop-up gypsy caravan around them or something like that. He said, as soon as you've got that, that's when you've got the fraudster. He said, but you just want to, just sort of thing. And he said, especially the ones who don't take money, and they'll be the ones who will say to you, I can't really tell you anything, or something like that. They'll just say that no one's there. So I've always been sort of open-minded, but so it just... there's lots of things I'm open-minded about, but I'm just not that interested in. I've been subscribing to the Fortean Times for coming on 30 years now, I suppose. Now, and I probably, on a good month, I probably read about a third of it. But there's other people around, and I give it to our local library, and people, and I'm sure there's people who pore avidly over the, as soon as I stuff about like ghosts, no, not interested, or UFOs, I only have fairly limited interest in, not very much. But I like obviously the cryptozoology stuff. Sometimes I get amusing out of the strange deaths and things like that. I like the snippets of those. So it's one of those. It's one of those sort of things. But I think that's the beauty of some of those, and I think it's one of the things that both aids and hinders the thing to do with cryptozoology. It's like there's so few people who are really interested that it's difficult to get people together at any particular point. So when you do, it's one of those things like which it was gutted that this year that because of the coronavirus I couldn't go to Weird Weekend North. It would have been my fourth straight year in a row. I think I didn't go to the very first one that was organised, but I've been to virtually, I think, all of the others since, barring one. And really, the other, and also it's almost like it means more to me in my annual calendar than Christmas does. Just going to that, and so and I can sit through most of the talks, even things like like ufology that I'm not particularly interested in, but it's good to just hear passionate speakers and things, and it's just great and things like that. And I think it's 2013. I managed. I coordinate or administer, if you want to call it, the London Cryptozoology Club. Now, at the moment, it's more or less just maintaining a Facebook page and accepting new members. But I do hope, I want to try and revigorate it. But about in 2013-14, we managed a small day conference sort of thing where we had 4 speakers over one day, and we had about 40, 50 people come to that, and I thought it went really, really well. But again, it was that whole thing trying to manage this whole thing of people who are very much like zoologists, and then people who are very, very crypto coming in and people coming in and going out. So so you also get things like so my friend Richard Thorns came in and did a talk about the pink-headed duck. About half the audience got up and walked out, because they went to the pubs, and then they came back 3/4 of an hour later to go to the next talk that was about something much more sort of like more on the mythological, paranormal side of cryptozoology. So I think it's one of the things. So even when you've got like people who have got some interest in cryptozoology, they come into it from very, very different angles, or things. So like I've always loved mythology, but I don't. To me, I've never really mixed it with my interest in cryptozoology, where some people they're one and the same, and I think that's the beauty of cryptozoology. But it also can be a bit of a it can try and get sometimes it's quite difficult to get the right audience. I think sometimes or not the right audience. If you get the best mix to get to the most people. I think you could be doing. I've spoken to a few people. Richard Freeman has been one of them, and a few other people said that in time to come, I'd love to be able to sort of find some way of funding a big cryptozoology conference, either a day one over a weekend, but really, really targeting, because I've got a background of working with children and young people, and a big part of it is actually targeting. Well, it makes you sound like a groomer or something,
Yes.
but targeting children and young people to do some activities with them to stop their interest. And particularly, I was thinking, I'd love to sort of target, sort of like zoology students, environmental students, some of them, because I know with things like, for instance, with the British big cats, it's like, most of that, or not most, but a huge amount of evidence that comes in from people who work for the Wildlife Trust, the RSPB, people who spend a lot of time, a bit like, in some ways, a bit like Sasquatch, Bigfoot, people who spend a lot of time naturally outdoors. I mean, they're the people who see them, and they're the people who notice things that are a little bit untoward. And a few years ago, about three or four of us from the London Cryptozoology Club spent a great day down in Dorset with them. I don't know if I can't remember his surname. I always know him as Big Cat John. Now he works for the local council or as like a wildlife officer down in Dorset or Hampshire, somewhere like that. And he was just taking us to the different places around there about where big cats were. And because again his background in mainstream biology, environmentalism, he was talking about territories very much like things like that. So for me, that's a really, really fascinating part of cryptozoology. I mean, I love that whole thing of out of place animals, of like pumas, lynxes, black leopards, things that we know exist, but they really shouldn't be in the British countryside. But seemingly that they are. And where I live in South London, we've got the big mystery all around us, and they wake me up every morning, is the ring-necked parakeets, and like where did they come from, and blah blah.
Yes.
And for me, there's all sorts of I always say to people, like, well, do you realise how long parrots live? Do you realise how long, you only need to have like one or two escaping every year over 50 or 100 years even, now sort of, looking at things about that, showing about how populations grow and how they can sort of explode once they reach a certain point. And so, for me, again, that's all cryptozoology, but, because I look out of my literally, and I look out of my bedroom window and can see them in the trees at the end of the garden. That's like 40 foot away. So it's but it's still cryptozoology in its purest form. And I think that that's why I say sometimes it is very, very mundane, and sometimes it's as paranormal and as bizarre as the whole thing of black dogs, and that sort of thing. And I think that's the whole thing for me. I said it is that the beauty, but also the bane of cryptozoology is like people come into it for all sorts of different, come into it with all sorts of different interest levels.
Yeah, I mean the parakeets is a really good example, because I went to a wedding in 2011. And we had the reception. The ceremony was done in Bromley.
Oh yeah, it's just up the road from me. Yeah.
Yes, because when you mentioned the parakeets, I'm thinking I reckon I know where you live. So because I've got a couple of mates from South East London, Greenwich and Bromley area, so I know that area pretty well. So other than my usual trips to London tend to keep me in North London, where my football team apparently play occasionally. But obviously my friends live South East, so I always hadn't had the opportunity to see them, and we went. It was in August, this wedding, lovely day, and they went into the park next to Bromley Registry Office.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah,
and we were outside at 3:00, and all of a sudden, there must have been thousands of them just came over.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I'd ever seen them in real life, and I was just blown away. Not that I thought that people were exaggerating or making it up, because I'd seen enough pictures and footage over the years.
Yeah.
But to see them for the first time in a park in London, it just makes you think, how on earth have they grown to this size? Because there were thousands of them. Every single tree was covered in them. I don't know what went off at 3:00. Whether it's some kind of body clock thing or they're used, some kind of migratory thing or whatever, or a predator protection response, I'm not sure. But it was just jaw-dropping to actually see something like that, which, to all intents and purposes, is an impossibility.
Yes, yeah.
It's beautiful as well.
Yeah.
Noisy, but beautiful.
They are. We've all just got used to them around here, really. They're sort of like, they're sort of like, they're nest robbers and taking over that sort of the greater spotted woodpeckers. But the greater woods that come on our bird feeders the same as the parrots do. They're up at our local park, and unless we've got some very, very long-lived greater spotted woodpeckers here, they've done all right for a good 6 or a dozen generations with the parrots here as well. So we think that they're actually doing well together. And a few years ago I always get confused. One of the birds of prey, whichever one that comes over in the winter, either the merlin or the hobby. I always forget which one. But one of them, the winter one, has taken to hunting the parakeets. So they realise that they're pretty easy prey, and quite noticeable. So sort of like, again, evolution in practice there. So yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, big time. I mean, it's interesting because obviously where I live in Sheffield. We've got a wonderful little population of mandarin ducks.
Oh, yes.
Which, I can walk, I think it's about 10 minutes, I can walk up my road, and there's the river, Porter Brook that runs down, and it's quite small, it's not massive. And they're always there, just bobbing about. And I've noticed over the last 10 years they seem to double every year now. There's a good 100, 150 of them now, whereas 10 years ago there was probably a dozen. And so I was really interested in that because I was thinking, well, are they crossbreeding? Because they seem to just hang out with normal ducks. When I dove into it, I was amazed to discover that they have a genetic abnormality, which means that they're ducks, but they can't breed with ducks.
Ah, okay, yeah.
Which once again, then I thought, well, that's even more interesting. So you've got a population that is essentially self-contained, but doing very well. But then again, you're like, well, where have they come from?
Yes, yeah.
Beautiful as well. They're so colourful.
Yeah, we get a few of them down here. Not that many, I have to say, but we do get. But where at the moment, I'm back in London at the moment. But last year I've been working in Herefordshire, and there you see them occasionally there on some of the we've got like the bigger, slower moving rivers over there, and that. And it's not that unusual to see them there as well. So I think they're going to be one of those. So, they're going to be very well established in this country before too long. I would have thought pretty much throughout as well as, and I think perhaps that's going to be the same thing with the big cats. At some point, I think I'm hoping there will be some official recognition, particularly if things go about like with I'm very, very follow a lot of stuff about rewilding the landscape and things like that. And I'm thinking somebody's only got to turn around and say with regard to lynxes, they're already there. So we don't, it's just so bringing out all this, you can't bring lynxes into the landscape. I mean, any government of whatever stamp, if they was behind the rewilding scheme, could actually say, actually, the realities are, we've known for 40, 50 years now that there are self-sustaining populations of, and I always want to put this out, of the smaller big cats, not... Yeah. So it's not like, you're not talking lions and tigers here. It's all like, the smaller big cats. We know there are self-sustaining populations. They're keeping themselves to themselves by and large. And that again, is that whole thing about how you always... you can always find something new and interesting. And I was reading something about that recently. So, with big things about they'll kill sheep, on the rewilding thing if you bring back lynxes. And they said, actually, big cats don't like sheep for the simple reason of the way they eat. Yeah. Is that, and they don't have great big tearing teeth and that, so therefore they've got a lot of work to get through a load of wool. So they don't really like sheep. They're much more likely to hunt deer and rabbits and things. Yes. So and let's get us a few of them on the up in the Scottish Highlands and stuff like that to bring down the deer population up there.
Yeah, I mean, nothing surprises me because there are so many weird little creatures that have established little populations. I was reading a wonderful story the other day. It always makes me laugh. There always seems to be runaway wallabies in the Netherlands, which always makes me chuckle because obviously it's one of those things that I think unless people look into it, they don't realise that there are some very well established wallaby colonies in the UK.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid. I think it was one of those things when I was a kid and I first started reading things like cryptozoology. They talked about like wallabies in the, and they sort of like they seem to pop up and they come and go, don't they? And then and then sort of like and they disappear. And there's a peak. I remember they used to say it was in the Peak District. I remember that was where there was a colony there that was hanging on for hung on for quite a long time. And I think the idea was that eventually they went extinct after about 10 or 12 years or something, but they must have been self-sustaining for a while, as if they'd have gone out. So
well, the population that lives on the North Yorkshire moors is very well established. It's a very large colony.
Right. Oh wow. Okay.
And I know there is, strangely enough, there is a good population on the Isle of Man.
Oh, okay.
Which I think they assume. I would hope they escape from a zoo, because I can't see a wallaby swimming across the Irish Sea there, James, to be honest, or getting a lift on a ferry or something. But and there's little pockets. I think there's supposed to be one Dartmoor. I believe there's supposed to be a little colony down there. So we've got capybaras in Norfolk, we've got wallabies in North Yorkshire, you've got giant wild hogs running around the Forest of Dean. So I mean, and then people say, "Oh no, you can't have big cats in the country." It's like, well, hang on, we've got capybaras in Norfolk. Why not? It's a strange thing. So as I've said many times on this show, nature finds a way. Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things is that people don't sort of like what they think to be is our native wildlife. I mean, there's a lot of things that I think it's the rabbits were brought here by the Romans or the Normans. I'm not too sure. So, the rabbits aren't probably not a native species as such, but they're entrenched now within our culture, even, as, things like that. So things that are, things go from being alien to becoming normal to then becoming traditional. That's it's an ongoing developing process, and I think that's what cryptozoology is. And I think sometimes in the perhaps in the some of the things now that we might think of being mainstream people might think is quite bizarre, that their children or grandchildren would just take for granted.
Exactly. I mean, imagine telling somebody 50 years ago in London that you'd have the largest population of parakeets outside of Africa flying about.
Yeah.
And they'd probably ask you what you've been drinking, I suspect.
Yes, probably.
Oh, well, and I think that's the best way we should wrap it up, really, Jez. I think the cornerstone of cryptozoology, I think, is the fact that it's about using a love of the weird, but maintaining a foot in the camp of zoology and using scientific frameworks and knowledge in regards to proving some of these wonderful and weird creatures around the world, because we know normal creatures can adapt to circumstances where, on face value, you would expect them not to thrive in the slightest.
Yes. Yeah, completely. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
So listen, as you touched on, where can everybody find your Facebook group and
well, all I've got is the London Cryptozoology Club. So it's very straightforward. London Cryptozoology Club on Facebook. That's our only presence. There are, I think it's about over 300 members now. As I said, we did a couple of years ago. We used to tried to meet up about once a month and that, but then, different people's work commitments change and things like that. But I'm going to try, I'm thinking once all of this is hopefully, this COVID-19 nonsense is hopefully over, or we can all start mixing again, I'll be moving back to London in the next in the next 3 to 6 months. So probably the other side of Christmas is to start up some sort of I thought my idea would be perhaps meetings 2 or 3 times a year, sort of thing like that, and perhaps do something a bit more entrenched in that. But as in my experience, cryptozoologists are lovely people, but trying to organise something, it is like the proverbial herding cats. So, so it is what it is. But certainly I've always said to people that I'd rather sit around and I'd rather have some fun talking to them while I'm trying to herd them than sitting down and watching an episode of Celebrity Love Island, that's for sure. So,
well, listen, the very best of luck for it. I'll keep my eye on it, and hopefully you'll get things moving again, and if I'm ever in the area, I'll certainly try and pop along next time if
Cheers, Paul.
my schedule matches. So listen, thank you for a lovely conversation. It's been lovely to finally chat with you, James.
Yep. Cheers.
Thank you for your thoughts and everything, and we'll catch up soon. You take care.
No problem. You too. Thanks a lot then. Bye-bye.